At dinner, my son-in-law threw hot soup in my face and smiled, saying, "That is what you deserve." My daughter looked at me and said, "He is right, Dad." I said nothing. I just wiped my burning face and left. But before leaving, I made one quick call. What happened next, they never forgot. If you are listening to this and you think you know your family, let me tell you something. You never truly know anyone until they think you have nothing left to offer them. My name is Harrison Caldwell, but everyone calls me Hank. I am 70 years old, and for the last 5 years I have lived like a ghost in the lives of my own children. I drive a rusted 1990 Ford pickup truck. I wear flannel shirts that have seen better days, and I let my children believe that my Social Security check of $1,500 a month is the only money I have in this world. They think I am just a retired truck driver, a man whose time has passed. They do not know that I am the founder of Caldwell Logistics. They do not know that I still hold the golden share, the ultimate veto power over an empire worth hundreds of millions. I hid it to teach them independence. I hid it to see if they loved me for me. Tonight, on my 70th birthday, I got my answer, and it burned worse than fire. The dining room of the house in the Chicago suburbs was warm, but the air was freezing. This was a house I paid for. 80% of the down payment came from my accounts funneled through a trust, so they would never know it was me. But on paper it belongs to Brad and Emily. Brad sat at the head of the table adjusting the cuff of his shirt to show off his new Rolex. A Submariner, $18,000. I knew the price because I know the value of things. I also knew he bought it with borrowed money because Brad is a failed real estate broker who thinks success is something you wear, not something you build. He tapped his wine glass with a silver fork, demanding attention. "I want to make a toast to myself," he said with that greasy smile of his, "for closing the deal of the century this week. Big things are coming." He looked at me, his eyes full of contempt. "You wouldn't understand, Hank. High finance is a bit more complex than driving a truck from point A to point B." I stayed silent. I looked at my daughter, Emily. She was sitting there nervously playing with her napkin. She was 35 years old, but she looked like a scared child. She was wearing a diamond necklace that I knew they could not afford. She refused to meet my eyes. "Happy birthday, Dad," she whispered finally, sliding a small envelope across the table. It was a gift card to a discount pharmacy. $20. "Thank you, honey," I said genuinely. I reached under my chair and pulled out my gift for my grandson, little Leo, who was playing on the floor. It was a wooden truck hand-carved from oak. I had spent 3 weeks in my garage sanding it, polishing it until the wood felt like silk. I made it with my own hands, just like I built my company. Brad snatched the toy from my hands before I could give it to the boy. He held it up like it was a piece of garbage. "What is this, Hank?" "Firewood. We buy Leo iPads and drones. We do not give him scraps from your garage." He tossed the truck onto the floor. It landed with a heavy thud, and a piece of the wheel chipped off. My heart cracked with that sound, but I kept my composure. I turned back to my soup, a thick orange pumpkin bisque. I took a spoonful. It was cold and overwhelmingly salty. "This is a bit salty," I said quietly. "Just a comment. A simple observation from an old man." That was the spark. Brad slammed his fist on the table, making the fine china jump. The vein in his neck bulged. "Salty? You are complaining. You sit in my house eating my food, drinking my wine, and you have the audacity to complain. You pay $1,500 a month, Hank. That does not even cover the heating bill for the pool. You are a leech, a useless old leech who has overstayed his welcome." Brad, Emily said softly, but she did not stop him. "No, Emily, he is right." Brad stood up, grabbing his bowl. The soup was steaming hot. I saw the madness in his eyes, but I did not think he would do it. I did not think a human being could treat family this way. "If you do not like the soup, Hank, maybe you should wear it." He swung his arm. The thick orange liquid hit me squarely in the face. It splashed into my eyes, my nose, my mouth. The heat was instantaneous. It was searing. I gasped, choking on the liquid as it dripped down my chin and onto my chest. But the physical pain was nothing compared to what I saw when I looked down. I was wearing my old blue flannel shirt. It was the last shirt my wife Martha bought me before she passed away 5 years ago. It was my armor. It was the only thing I had left that smelled like her memory. Now it was stained orange, ruined by the cruelty of a man who lived in a house I bought. I sat there frozen. The soup dripped from my eyelashes. My skin felt like it was blistering. The room went silent. Even Brad seemed shocked by his own violence for a second, but then he doubled down. "That is what you deserve," he sneered. "Look at you. Pathetic." I slowly took my napkin and wiped my eyes. The stinging was unbearable. I turned to Emily. My little girl. The girl I had carried on my shoulders. The girl I had protected from every storm. I waited for her to scream. I waited for her to slap him. I waited for her to hand me a towel. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling, "you should not have criticized the food. You know Brad is under a lot of stress. You should apologize to him." The silence that followed that sentence was heavy enough to crush the world. Apologize. My daughter wanted me to apologize to the man who just assaulted me. In that moment, Harrison Caldwell, the truck driver, died, and Harrison Caldwell, the chairman, woke up. I did not yell. I did not flip the table. I stood up slowly. My knees creaked, but my spine was straight. I used the napkin to wipe the worst of the mess from Martha's shirt. I folded the napkin neatly and placed it on the table next to the broken wooden truck. I looked Brad directly in the eyes. He was smirking, thinking he had won, thinking he had put the old dog in his place. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," I whispered. He laughed. It was a loud barking sound. "What are you going to do, Hank? Run away in your garbage truck? Go ahead. Sleep under a bridge for all I care." I did not look at Emily again. She had made her choice. She chose the lifestyle. She chose the illusion. She chose the abuser. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I walked through the hallway past the family photos that were all lies. I opened the heavy oak front door and stepped out into the Chicago winter. The wind hit my burned face like 1,000 needles, but it felt good. It felt clean. I walked down the driveway to my old Ford pickup. Snow was falling, covering the windshield. I did not get in immediately. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old flip phone. It was a burner phone, the kind drug dealers and billionaires use when they do not want to be tracked. I dialed a number I had not called in 5 years. It rang once. Catherine Ross. Her voice was sharp, precise. She was my former general counsel, my protege, the most ruthless lawyer in the state. "Cat," I said, my voice raspy from the smoke of betrayal. "It is Hank." There was a pause on the line, a pause of recognition, and then a shift in tone. A soldier reporting for duty. "Mr. Chairman," she said. "I did not expect this call. Is everything all right?" "No, Cat. Nothing is all right. Initiate Omega Protocol." I heard the sound of a chair moving, a computer waking up. Omega Protocol. The nuclear option. The plan I had designed years ago in case of absolute catastrophe. It meant freezing everything. It meant unmasking the assets. It meant war. "Consider it done," she said. "What is the target?" "Brad Jenkins and Emily Caldwell," I said, looking back at the house glowing warmly in the snow. "I want their financial autopsy on my desk in 1 hour. Every debt, every loan, every secret." "And Cat?" "Yes, sir." "Destroy them." I hung up the phone. My face was still burning, but inside I felt cold. Colder than the ice on the pavement. They thought I was a candle flickering out in the wind. They forgot that a candle can burn down a whole house if you play with it. I opened the door of my truck, and the engine roared to life. The game was over. The war had just begun. I sat in the cab of my 1990 Ford pickup truck, and the cold leather of the seat bit through my trousers, but I did not feel it. The only thing I felt was the fire on my face. My skin was tight, pulsing, with a heat that seemed to come from the very bone. I reached up to touch my cheek, and my fingers came away wet with blistering fluid mixed with the sticky residue of pumpkin soup. It smelled of nutmeg and betrayal. I should have gone to the hospital. Any normal man of 70 would have driven straight to the emergency room. But I am not a normal man. I am a man who built a logistics empire from a single rusty van. I am a man who survived union wars and recessions and hostile takeovers. I know that pain is just information. It tells you you are still alive. And right now I needed to be very alive because I had work to do. I drove 2 blocks away from the house that I had paid for and pulled into the shadows of an old oak tree. The streetlights cast long, skeletal shadows across the hood of my truck. I breathed in the smell of old gasoline and dust, the smell of my sanctuary. For 5 years, this truck had been my disguise. It was the prop that convinced the world I was nothing more than a washed-up old driver living on pennies. But tonight, the disguise was coming off. I reached under the passenger seat and pulled out a small metal box welded to the frame. I punched in a code that my fingers remembered better than my own birthday. Click. The box opened. Inside lay a single object, a black flip phone. It was old technology. Simple, untraceable. The kind of phone that does not have apps or cameras or distractions. It only has connections. My hands were shaking not from the pain, but from the adrenaline that was flooding my system for the first time in years. It was the old rush, the feeling of the hunt. I flipped the phone open, and the screen glowed with a pale blue light. I dialed a number I had memorized a decade ago. It rang once, twice. Catherine Ross. Her voice was sharp as a razor blade. It was 11 at night, but I knew she would answer. Kat never slept. She was the only person in the world who knew the truth about who I really was. She was my former chief legal counsel, the woman I had trained to be a shark in a sea of goldfish. Kat, I said. The word came out as a croak, my throat raw from the shock. Hank. The shift in her tone was instant. She went from professional to alert. What is wrong? You never call this line unless the sky is falling. The sky fell, Kat, I said, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. A monster stared back at me, one side of his face angry and red. They crossed the line. I did not have to explain who they were. Kat had warned me years ago. She had told me that hiding my wealth to teach them a lesson was a dangerous game. She had told me that money reveals character, but lack of money reveals teeth. She was right. I took a breath and gave the order I had hoped I would never have to give. Initiate Omega Protocol. There was a silence on the other end. A heavy, pregnant silence. Omega Protocol was the nuclear option. It was the scorched earth policy. It meant unmasking every asset, freezing every trust fund, and unleashing the full legal might of the Caldwell Empire. Are you sure, Hank? She asked softly. Once we start this, there is no going back. The anonymity is gone. The protection is gone. You will be Harrison Caldwell again. I looked back toward the house down the street. I could see the warm glow of the windows. I could imagine them inside, laughing, cleaning up the soup, wiping away the old man's mess, drinking the wine I had paid for. I am sure I said, my voice hardening into steel. Freeze the shadow accounts. Lock down the trust. And Kat, I want a full forensic audit on Brad Jenkins. I want to know every dime he owes, every lie he has told, and every skeleton in his closet. I want his financial autopsy on my desk in 1 hour. Consider it done, she said. And Hank, please be careful. When you corner a rat, it bites. I hung up the phone and closed it with a snap. I sat there in the darkness, waiting for the machine I had just activated to start turning. The pain in my face was throbbing now, a steady drumbeat of agony. I reached into the glove compartment and found a tube of burn ointment I kept for engine work. I smeared the cool gel over my cheek, wincing as I touched the raw skin. As I sat there waiting, the memories hit me harder than the soup. I looked at that house glowing in the distance, and my mind drifted back 10 years. I was sitting in a mahogany-paneled office holding a pen that cost more than my first car. I was signing a check for $800,000. It was supposed to be a surprise. Emily had just married Brad. They were young, broke, and full of dreams. I wanted to give them a foundation, a nest, but I did not want to control them, so I put the deed in their names. I put the title in the trust controlled by Emily. I thought I was giving them freedom. I remembered the day I gave them the keys. Emily had cried. She had hugged me and said, "Daddy, you are the best father in the world. We will take care of you forever." I believed her. I was a fool. I thought money was a gift. I did not realize that unearned money is a poison. It rots the soul. It makes people weak and entitled. I had created this. I had built the stage for my own humiliation. I had spent 5 years playing the pauper, pretending to be poor to see if they would love me without the checkbook. And tonight, I got my answer. They did not love me. They tolerated me. And when I became inconvenient, they threw me away like trash. The vibration of the phone in my hand snapped me back to the present. It was not a call. It was a text message, but not on the burner phone. It was on the secure encrypted pager I kept in the same metal box. A device linked directly to my primary banking server. I picked it up. The small green screen illuminated the darkness of the truck cab. Alert. Centurion card ending in 4099. Transaction approved. $10,000. Merchant Lucky Spin Online Casino. I stared at the numbers. The Centurion card. The black card. The one card I had kept active, the one card with no limit. I had given a supplementary card to Emily 5 years ago. I told her it was for life or death emergencies only, for surgery, for ransom, for the end of the world. She had never used it. Until tonight. $10,000. At an online casino. It wasn't Brad. Brad didn't have the PIN. Brad didn't have the card. It was Emily. While I sat here bleeding in my truck while my face burned from her husband's assault, my daughter was not crying. She was not packing her bags to come find me. She was gambling. She was stealing $10,000 from the father she just watched get humiliated. A cold laugh escaped my lips. It sounded like dry leaves scraping on concrete. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was a senile old man wandering into the snow to die. They had no idea that they had just swiped the card of the man who owned the bank. I put the truck in gear. The engine roared to life, a low growl that shook the frame. I was not going to a hotel. I was not going to hide. I had one more stop to make before the war truly began. I turned the wheel and drove into the night, leaving the suburbs behind. The old Hank was dead. The chairman was back, and he was coming to collect every single debt. The city skyline loomed ahead of me like a jagged set of teeth biting into the night sky. I drove the old Ford past the towering glass structures of the financial district, where money never sleeps and secrets are buried under layers of concrete and steel. My face was throbbing with a dull, heavy ache that radiated from my cheekbone to my jaw. The burn ointment was drying and tightening my skin, but I ignored it. I needed cash. Not the crumpled bills I kept in a coffee can under the sink, but real operational capital. I steered the truck into a narrow alleyway behind the Meridian Bank Tower. A security guard stepped out of the shadows, his hand resting on his belt. He took one look at my battered truck and my disheveled appearance and started to raise a hand to wave me off. Then he saw the license plate. It was a custom plate, one that was flagged in their system as untouchable. He lowered his hand and stepped back, disappearing into the dark. He knew better than to ask questions. I parked and climbed out. The air here smelled of ozone and expensive cologne, quite a difference from the smell of old oil and pumpkin soup that clung to my clothes. I walked up to a standalone ATM tucked into a stone alcove. This was not a machine for the public. It did not have advertisements for credit cards or cheery graphics. It was a private terminal linked directly to the high-yield holding accounts of the bank's top-tier clients. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a plain matte black card. There were no numbers on the front. No name. Just a small gold chip embedded in the corner. I slid it into the slot. The screen did not ask for a language preference. It simply turned a deep navy blue and requested an access code. My fingers moved automatically over the keypad. 7, 4, 1, 9, 0, 0, alpha. It was a sequence I had not used in 5 years. A sequence that unlocked the vault I had built over 40 years of blood and sweat. The machine whirred softly, processing the encryption. Then the numbers appeared on the screen in stark white font. Current balance, $82,450,000. I stared at the number. It glowed in the darkness, illuminating the burn on my face. 82 million. It was enough to buy every house on my daughter's street. It was enough to buy the hospital where I picked up Alfred. It was enough to burn the world down. 5 years ago, I made the hardest decision of my life. I sold Caldwell Logistics. 500 trucks, 3 million square feet of warehouse space, a logistics network that spanned the continent. I sold it all the week after Martha died. The grief was too heavy and the empty house was too loud. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to know if my children loved me or if they just loved the safety net I provided. So I created a test. I put the money here in this shadow account. I bought the old truck. I moved into the small guest cottage on the estate and rented out the main house. I told Emily and Brad that the company had gone under, that bad investments had wiped me out. I told them I was living on Social Security. I wanted to see if they would step up. I wanted to see if they would offer me a room, if they would offer to pay for dinner, if they would treat me with dignity simply because I was their father. I looked at the balance again and felt a wave of nausea. I had failed. The test was a disaster. By hiding the money, I hadn't taught them independence. I had only revealed their greed. They didn't learn to work harder. They learned to despise me for being poor. They looked at my rough hands and my old clothes and saw a failure, not a father. I pressed the withdrawal button. I selected $2,000, the maximum daily cash limit for physical withdrawal. The machine counted the bills with a rapid, rhythmic snapping sound. It spit out a thick stack of $100 bills. I took the money and shoved it into my pocket. It felt heavy against my leg. $2,000. An hour ago, Brad had mocked me for a $20 gift card. If he knew what I was holding now, he would probably be on his knees licking my boots. That thought didn't make me feel powerful. It made me feel sick. I retrieved my card and turned back to the truck. The cold wind bit at my exposed skin, but the fire inside me was burning hotter than ever. I needed to find a hotel. I needed to clean this soup off my face. I needed to plan the funeral for the life Brad and Emily thought they had. My burner phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a sharp, aggressive vibration. I pulled it out. Kat. I answered immediately. Report. Her voice was tight. Faster than I expected, Hank. But it is worse than we thought. Much worse. Talk to me, Kat. I climbed into the cab and slammed the door, shutting out the city noise. I pulled the property records and the liens like you asked. Brad didn't just borrow money for a Rolex or a car. He went to the secondary market. The predatory lenders. Go on, I said, gripping the steering wheel. He mortgaged the house, Hank. The house you paid for. He forged your signature on a quitclaim deed, transferring the title to a shell company he controls, and then he leveraged it for a hard money loan. I closed my eyes. The house. Martha's dream house. The one I bought for them so my grandson would have a yard. How much, I asked. $2 million. $2 million. He had gambled away $2 million on what? Crypto. Tech startups. It didn't matter. The money was gone. And there is a kicker, Hank. Kat's voice dropped an octave. The lender isn't a bank. It is the Ivanov Syndicate. They are loan sharks, Hank. Real ones. I stared through the windshield at the brick wall of the alley. The Ivanovs. I knew them from the old days when I had to keep my trucks from being hijacked on the interstate. They were not bankers. They were butchers. What are the terms, Kat? She hesitated. That is the problem. He is in default. He missed the balloon payment last week. They gave him a grace period because he promised them a big payout from an inheritance. Inheritance. The word hung in the air. He told them you were sick, Hank. He told them you were senile and on your deathbed. He promised them he would have control of your assets, your pension, whatever scraps he thought you had within the month. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. So that was the plan. Get the power of attorney, put the old man in a home, sell the truck, take the pension, and pay off the mob. When is the deadline, I asked. 48 hours. If he doesn't pay $2 million by Friday night, they take the house. And Hank, knowing these guys, they won't just evict them. They will hurt him. And they might hurt Emily and Leo, too. My grip on the phone tightened until the plastic creaked. They had betrayed me. They had humiliated me. They had stolen from me. But Leo was innocent. My grandson was sleeping in a house that was about to become a war zone. Okay, Kat. I know what I have to do. You are not going to pay it, are you, Hank? No. I am not going to pay it. Not yet. I am going to buy the debt. There was a silence on the line, and then I could practically hear Kat smiling. You want to become the lender? Exactly. Contact the Ivanovs. Tell them a private investor wants to purchase the note. Offer them full value plus 10% for the trouble. I want to own that debt, Kat. I want to be the one holding the hammer when the clock strikes 0. Consider it done. But Hank, you need to get somewhere safe. You sound like you are running on fumes. I am fine, Kat. Just get the paperwork ready. I am going to need a very specific document drafted for tomorrow morning. What document? A confession, I said. I started the engine. I drove out of the alley, merging back into the traffic. The city was alive around me, oblivious to the fact that a predator was moving through its veins. I touched the pocket with the cash. I touched the pocket with the phone. I had the money. I had the information. Now I just needed the opportunity, and I knew exactly how to get it. I was going back into the lion's den, but this time I wasn't the prey. I parked the truck in the underground garage of the Ross & Partners building. The security guard in the glass booth hesitated when he saw my vehicle, which looked like it belonged in a scrapyard rather than a reserved spot in a Class A building. But he saw the access card I flashed and opened the gate. I took the private elevator to the 45th floor. The silence of the lift was heavy. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirrored walls. I looked like a madman. My face was a map of angry red welts and my clothes were stiff with dried soup. But my eyes were clear. They were the eyes of a man who had just woken up from a 5-year coma. The elevator doors slid open and Catherine Ross was waiting for me. She was wearing a silk blouse and tailored trousers, looking every bit the iron lady of corporate law that I had trained her to be. But when she saw my face, her professional mask cracked. She took a step forward, her hand reaching out instinctively. "Hank," she whispered. "My God, we need to get a doctor." I brushed her hand away gently. "I do not need a doctor, Kat. I need a pen and I need the truth. Show me the file. She nodded, tightening her jaw. She led me into her corner office. The view of Chicago was breathtaking, a sea of lights stretching into the darkness, but I did not have time for views. On her glass desk lay a thick manila folder. It was the autopsy of my son-in-law's financial life. Sit down, Hank. You are not going to like this. I sat. The leather chair creaked under my weight. I opened the folder. The first page was a summary of debts. It was a sea of red ink. Credit cards maxed out. Personal loans defaulted. Car payments missed. But those were just the symptoms. The disease was on the next page. Here it is, Kat said, pointing to a document with a blue header. The loan agreement with the Ivanov Syndicate. It is not officially registered with the county, of course, but in their world, this piece of paper is more binding than a Supreme Court ruling. I scanned the terms. Principal amount, $2 million. Interest rate, 25% compounded monthly. Collateral, the property located at 42 Oak Creek Lane. My house. The house I bought to be a sanctuary for my grandson. I flipped to the signature page, and there it was. Harrison Caldwell. It was my name. It was my signature. Or at least it looked like it. The loop of the H was slightly too wide and the slant was a degree too sharp, but to a layman or a loan shark it was perfect. He practiced, I said, my voice low. He must have spent hours tracing my signature from old birthday cards or checks. He stole my identity to sell my home out from under me. It gets worse, Hank Cat said softly. She reached across the desk and turned the page. Look at the notary section. Look at the witness line. I looked. My vision blurred for a second, and I had to blink to clear it. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. I wanted to believe it was another forgery. But I knew that handwriting. I had taught the owner of that hand how to write her name in cursive when she was 6 years old. I had watched that hand sign a marriage certificate. I had held that hand when she was afraid of the dark. Witnessed by Emily Caldwell. The signature was shaky, but it was hers. There was a small ink blot at the end of the Y, a nervous tick she always had when she was lying or under pressure. I felt a sensation in my chest that was not pain. It was something colder. It was the feeling of a connection being severed. A cord that had lasted 35 years snapping in the silence of an office. She knew I whispered. She did not just know Kat. She was in the room. She watched him forge my name. She watched him sign our lives away to the mob. And then she picked up the pen and validated it. She is scared, Hank Cat said, playing the devil's advocate. Brad is manipulative. He probably told her it was the only way. He probably told her it was just a formality. I slammed the folder shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet office. Do not make excuses for her, Cat. She is 35 years old. She is a mother. She knows right from wrong. She watched her husband throw boiling soup in my face tonight and told me to apologize. Now I see why. It was not just submission. It was guilt. She could not look at me because she had already sold me. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights looked cold and indifferent. For 5 years, I had played the role of the helpless old man. I thought I was testing their character, but I wasn't. I was enabling their corruption. I had made it easy for them to discard me because I made myself look disposable. I turned back to Kat. My face hurt, but the pain was distant now like a memory. Where is the assignment of debt contract? I asked. Kat pulled another document from her drawer. It was drafted and ready. I spoke to the Ivanov representative 20 minutes ago. They are happy to unload the paper. They prefer cash over breaking legs. They were surprised, though. They asked why a private equity fund would want to buy a toxic loan on a suburban house. What did you tell them? I told them we specialize in distressed asset recovery. I picked up the pen. It was a heavy silver fountain pen. I uncapped it and looked at the gold nib. Distressed asset, I repeated. That is one way to put it. I signed the document. With that stroke of the pen, I was no longer just their father or their father-in-law. I was their creditor. I owned the roof over their heads. I owned the ground they walked on. I owned their future. Wire the funds, I said. 2.2 million. Pay the Ivanovs. Get the original note. And Kat, I want the foreclosure papers drafted immediately. Do not file them yet. Just have them ready. Done. There is one more thing, I said. What is it? I need a new will. Kat paused, her hand hovering over her laptop. Hank, are you sure? I am sure. Revoke the previous trust. Revoke the inheritance clauses. Everything goes to the charitable foundation. Except for a specific trust for Leo for his education, which he can access when he is 25, provided he has no contact with his parents regarding the money. And Emily. I looked at the witness signature one last time. Leave her $1, I said, so she knows I did not forget her. Kat typed silently for a moment, then looked up. Her eyes were sad but resigned. She knew better than to argue with me when I was in this mode. So what is the play, Hank? You own the debt. You have the cash. You could walk in there tomorrow with the sheriff and throw them out. No, I said. That is too easy. That is just legal. I want them to feel it. I want them to hope. I want them to think they have won. I want Brad to believe he is the smartest man in the room. And then when he is standing at the top of the mountain, I want to be the one who pushes him off. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the window. The burn on my face was a badge of honor now, a reminder of why I had to do what came next. They want to play games with fake documents and deception, I said, my voice dropping to a low growl. Fine. I built an empire negotiating with unions, politicians, and cartels. These two are amateurs. They want to play a con game. Good. I will teach them what a masterclass in fraud looks like. I checked my burner phone. No missed calls. No texts from Emily checking if I was alive. Just silence. I am going back, I said. To the house, Kat asked, alarmed. Hank, that is dangerous. Brad is volatile. I know. But he needs to believe his plan is working. He needs me to come back. He needs me to sign his power of attorney paperwork so he can put me in a home and secure the asset for the Ivanovs. If I disappear, he panics. If I return defeated and broken, he gets confident. And a confident man makes mistakes. I buttoned my stained flannel shirt over the bandages Kat had given me. I hunched my shoulders, letting the posture of the powerful CEO drain away, replacing it with the stoop of the tired old truck driver. I am going to let them lie to me, Kat. I am going to let them think they are manipulating me. I am going to eat their food and listen to their apologies, and while they are smiling, I am going to be digging their graves. I walked to the door. Get some sleep, Kat. Tomorrow is going to be a busy day. I took the elevator down alone. The anger was gone. The sadness was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard purpose. I was going home, not to sleep, but to hunt. The sun was barely struggling over the horizon, painting the dirty snow of the motel parking lot in shades of gray and bruised purple, when my burner phone vibrated against the cheap laminate of the nightstand. I had not slept. I had spent the last 4 hours sitting in a chair that smelled of stale cigarette smoke and despair, watching the door, waiting for a hitman or a miracle. I got neither. Instead, I got a phone call from the daughter who had signed my life away. I looked at the caller ID. It was Emily. Of course it was. They had let me stew for the night, hoping the cold and the pain would break my spirit. Now came the real. I cleared my throat, forcing a roughness into my voice, a weakness that I did not feel. I pressed the green button and held the phone to my uninjured ear. Dad. Her voice was a high-pitched wail, breathless and frantic. Oh God, Dad, where are you? We have been calling hospitals all night. We were so scared. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. If I did not know about the online casino transaction time-stamped at midnight while she was supposedly calling hospitals, I might have believed her. If I did not know she had witnessed my forged signature, I might have felt a pang of guilt. Now all I felt was a clinical detachment, like a scientist observing a specimen under a microscope. "I am safe, Emily," I said, letting my voice quaver just enough. "I stayed at a motel." I needed to think. There was a pause and I could hear her breathing change. She covered the mouthpiece, probably to signal Brad. Then she came back on stronger. "Dad, please come home. Brad is sick over what happened. He was drunk, Dad. He did not mean it. He has been crying all morning. He wants to apologize. He wants to make it right." I looked at my reflection in the cracked motel mirror. The burn on my cheek had blistered, turning an angry purple. Crying. I doubted Brad had cried since he realized he could not return his leased BMW. "I do not know, Emily," I said, dragging out the hesitation. "He was very angry. He said I was a burden." "No, Dad, no. That was the stress talking. Look, we sat down and talked. We realized we have been handling everything wrong. You are not a burden, you are family. We want to help you. We want to take care of you properly. No more fighting. We want to manage everything for you so you do not have to worry about money or the house or anything. Just come home and let us fix this. Manage everything." There were the magic words. The trap was set. I muted the phone for a second and looked at Kat, who was sitting on the edge of the other bed, having arrived with the paperwork an hour ago. I repeated Emily's words to her. Kat's eyes narrowed behind her glasses. "Power of attorney," she whispered, mouthing the words clearly. "They do not just want you back, Hank. They are on a deadline with the Ivanovs. They need access to your accounts, and they need legal authority to liquidate your assets without your consent. If you go back, they are going to shove a power of attorney document in your face before you even take your coat off. If you sign that, they can legally commit you to a state facility claiming dementia or incompetence and sell everything you own to pay off the mob." It was a solid plan. Evil, but solid. It was exactly what I would have done if I were a soulless predator with a 48-hour deadline. I unmuted the phone. "I'm tired, Emily," I said, sighing heavily. "I am very tired. The burn hurts. I do not have anywhere else to go." "Come home, Dad. I will make you soup. The good kind. Chicken noodle. We will take care of you. Just come home." "Okay," I said. "I will be there in an hour." I hung up. Kat looked at me with genuine concern. "You know you are walking into a cage," she said. "Once you step through that door, you are on their territory. If they realize you know about the loan or the forgery, Brad might get violent again. And this time he might use something harder than soup." "I know," I said, standing up and stretching my stiff back. "But a cage is only a cage if you do not have the key. And I have the master key. I need them to believe they have won, Kat. I need Brad to feel that surge of arrogance. When he feels safe, he will get sloppy. He will admit things, and I need that confession recorded." I walked into the motel bathroom. The fluorescent light hummed, buzzing like an angry hornet. I looked at the burn again. It was healing too well. It looked painful, but it looked manageable. That would not do. I needed to look pathetic. I needed to look like a beaten dog. I reached into my bag and pulled out a tube of thick antibiotic ointment. I smeared a heavy layer over the burn and then spread it further out onto my healthy skin, making the injury look weeping and infected. I intentionally did not comb my hair, letting the white strands stick up in disarray. I buttoned my flannel shirt wrong, skipping a hole so the hem hung unevenly. I hunched my shoulders, letting my chest collapse inward, mimicking the posture of the defeated elderly men I had seen in nursing homes, men who had given up on life. Kat watched my transformation in silence. "You are terrifying," she said softly. "You look exactly like my grandfather did the week before he died." Good, I said, my voice returning to its normal steel timbre for just a moment. Because that is exactly what they want to see. They want to see a dying man. I am going to give them a dying man. I reached into the pocket of my coat and pulled out the device Aisha had given me. It was smaller than a dime, a tiny black disc with a pinhole camera and a high-fidelity microphone. I pried off the second button of my flannel shirt, the one right over my sternum. With a steady hand, I pushed the device through the fabric and secured it from the back. To the naked eye, it looked exactly like a scuffed black plastic button. To me, it was a weapon. I tapped it once. A tiny vibration against my chest confirmed it was active and streaming to Kat's secure server. Testing, I whispered. Can you hear me? Kat pulled out her tablet and tapped the screen. She put on a pair of headphones. Loud and clear, Hank. Video feed is grainy, but audio is crystal. I will be listening to every word. The team is positioned 2 blocks away. If you say the code word, we breach the door in under 60 seconds. The code word is payday, I said. But do not breach unless I scream it. I need him to hang himself first. I walked out of the motel room into the biting wind. The snow had turned to gray slush under the tires of the morning commute. I climbed into my Ford. The engine groaned before turning over a sound of protest that matched my performance perfectly. The drive to the suburbs felt like a funeral procession. I watched the city fade into the manicured lawns and large driveways of the neighborhood I had subsidized. Every house looked peaceful, every lawn perfect. It was a facade. Behind those doors were debts, lies, and secrets. Mine just happened to be the biggest. I turned onto Oak Creek Lane. My heart began to hammer not from fear, but from a cold, calculated anticipation. I saw the house. My house. Brad's leased BMW was in the driveway, parked crookedly, as if he had arrived in a hurry or drunk. The curtains were drawn. It looked like a fortress closing its eyes to the world. I parked the truck on the street. I did not pull into the driveway. I wanted the walk to be long. I wanted the neighbors to see the old man shuffling toward his doom. I sat in the cab for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then I let go. I let my hands tremble. I let my mouth hang slightly open. I let the confusion cloud my eyes. I was no longer Hank the chairman. I was Hank the victim. I opened the door and stepped out. The cold air stung the ointment on my face, making my eyes water naturally. Perfect. Tears were good. Tears sold the lie. I walked up the driveway, dragging my feet. I could see the curtain in the living room twitch. They were watching. They were waiting. The spider and the fly. Except this time the fly was made of iron and the web was about to burn. I reached the front step. I paused, looking at the heavy oak door. Behind that wood were the 2 people who should have loved me most in the world. Instead, they were 2 predators waiting to pick the meat off my bones. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of pine and impending violence. I reached up and touched the button on my chest one last time, just to be sure. Showtime, I whispered. I raised my shaking hand and knocked. The heavy oak door swung open before I could even lower my hand. Brad stood there. He looked like a man who had been awake for 48 hours straight, which he probably had given the deadline hanging over his head. His eyes were bloodshot, and his expensive shirt was wrinkled, but the moment he saw me, the mask slammed into place. It was a transformation so sudden, it was almost impressive. His face crumpled into a mask of exaggerated remorse. Hank, oh God, Hank. He did not just step aside to let me in. He practically fell to his knees in the foyer. It was a performance that belonged on a stage, not in a suburban hallway. He grabbed my hand, his palms sweating and clammy against my rough skin. I am so sorry, he choked out. I do not know what happened to me last night. The stress, the deal falling through the wine. I lost my mind, Hank. Seeing you like this with your face. He gestured vaguely at my bandaged cheek. I feel like a monster. Please tell me you can forgive me. I looked down at him. From my hunched posture, he looked small, pathetic. A day ago, this performance might have worked. I might have seen a stressed young man making a mistake. But now I saw a predator checking his trap. I saw a man calculating how much my forgiveness was worth in dollars and cents. I let my hand tremble in his grip. I let my eyes lose focus, drifting past him to the living room. It hurts, Brad, I whispered, my voice raspy. It burns. I am confused. I know. Come in. Get out of the cold. He ushered me inside, guiding me by the elbow as if I were made of glass. The house smelled of roasted chicken and sage. It was a warm, comforting smell, the smell of home. It made my stomach turn. It was the scent of the bait. Emily came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked pale, her eyes darting between me and Brad. When she saw the angry red skin around the bandages, she flinched. Good. Let her see it. Let her see what her silence had bought. Dad, she said, her voice thin. I made soup. Chicken noodle. Your favorite. It is good for you, soup, I repeated, letting a flicker of fear cross my face. Not hot, she said quickly, rushing forward to take my coat. Warm. Just warm. Come sit down. They led me to the dining table. The same table where 24 hours ago I had been assaulted. The stain was gone, scrubbed clean, but I could still see the ghost of it. They sat me in the chair. Brad pulled it out for me, hovering like a waiter. We were so worried about you, Hank, Brad said, pouring me a glass of water. When you did not come back, we thought the worst. We thought you might have frozen out there. You did not call the police, I noted, my voice low. We did not want to embarrass you, Emily said quickly, setting a steaming bowl in front of me. We know how proud you are, Dad. We thought you just needed to cool off. I looked at the soup. It was homemade. Large chunks of chicken, carrots, celery. It looked delicious. I picked up the spoon, my hand shaking intentionally, clanking the silver against the ceramic bowl. I took a sip. It was good. It tasted like betrayal. I ate slowly, letting the silence stretch. They watched every mouthful. They were waiting. They were practically vibrating with impatience, but they forced themselves to sit still. They needed me fed. They needed me calm. They needed me compliant. This is good, I said, finally wiping my mouth with a napkin. Thank you, Emily. She offered a weak smile. I am glad you like it, Dad. We just want you to be healthy. Brad cleared his throat. It was the signal. The pleasantries were over. It was time for business. Hank, he said, leaning forward, his elbows on the table. While you were gone, Emily and I did a lot of thinking. We realized we have not been fair to you. You have been struggling on that small pension, living in that drafty guest cottage, driving that old truck. It is not right. I kept my eyes on the bowl. What do you mean? I asked. I mean you need security. Brad said, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. You are getting older, Hank. Your health is not what it used to be. Last night proved that. You were confused. You were agitated. We are worried about your future. I slowly looked up at him. And what do you propose? Brad reached under the table and pulled out a leather portfolio. He unzipped it with a smooth, practiced motion. He slid a stack of documents toward me. The paper was thick, expensive. We found a program, Brad said. It is a special insurance package for seniors. It covers everything. Medical care, assisted living if you ever need it, prescription drugs. It even protects your assets so the government cannot touch them. Insurance, I asked, feigning ignorance. Exactly, Emily chimed in. It is called the Senior Protection Initiative. But the enrollment window closes today, Dad. That is why we were so desperate to find you. We did not want you to miss out. I looked at the papers. The top sheet was a generic brochure, probably printed off the internet, with stock photos of happy elderly people playing chess. But underneath that was the real document. I reached out and pulled it closer, adjusting my reading glasses, which I had intentionally smeared with a bit of oil to make them cloudy. I squinted at the text. It was dense legal jargon: durable power of attorney, guardianship transfer, asset liquidation authority. There was no insurance. There was no protection. This was a surrender. If I signed this, I was handing them the legal right to control every penny I owned, every decision I made. I was handing them the right to commit me to an institution against my will. I see, I said, my finger tracing the line where my signature was required. And this will help me. It will save you, Hank, Brad said, handing me a pen. It means you never have to worry about bills again. We handle everything. We take the burden off your shoulders. You just sign here, and we do the rest. I took the pen. It was a heavy ballpoint. I held it over the paper. I could hear Brad's breathing stop. He was watching the tip of the pen like a hawk watching a mouse. This was it. This was the moment he had committed crimes for. $2 million worth of debt hung on the ink in this pen. My hand started to shake. I let the tremor travel up my arm to my shoulder. I squeezed the pen tight, then let it slip from my fingers. It clattered onto the table and rolled onto the floor. Oh! I gasped, putting a hand to my forehead. Dad, Emily stood up. Are you okay? I felt the blood rushing to my head. The dizziness was fake, but the exhaustion was real. The acting, the tension, the anger, it was taking a toll. I do not feel well, I mumbled, swaying slightly in the chair. The room is spinning. The burn hurts. Brad looked at the pen on the floor, then at me. His frustration was palpable. He looked like he wanted to grab my hand and force the signature, but he restrained himself. Just sign it, Hank, and then you can rest, he said, his voice tight. Just one signature. I cannot see the line, I whined. My eyes are blurry. I need to lie down. Just for a minute. Let me sleep a little. Dad, we really need this signed today, Emily said, her voice edging on panic. Let him rest, Brad snapped. He cut himself off, taking a deep breath. I mean, let him rest, Emily. He is obviously in pain. He turned to me, a forced smile stretching his lips. Of course, Hank. You go lie down in the guest room. Take a nap. We will do the paperwork when you wake up. You will feel better after some sleep. Thank you, I said, pushing myself up from the table. I leaned heavily on the chair. I am sorry. I am just so tired. It is okay, Brad said, standing up, but not moving to help me. Just rest. We are not going anywhere. I shuffled out of the dining room, dragging my feet on the hardwood. I walked down the hall to the guest room. It was a small room on the ground floor, the one they let me stay in when the cottage was too cold. It was furnished with their cast-offs, a lumpy mattress, and a dresser with a missing drawer. I went inside and closed the door. I did not lock it. A locked door makes people suspicious. I moved to the bed and sat down, making the springs squeak loudly. I kicked off my boots, letting them drop with a heavy thud. Then I lay back and waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Silence. Then the sound of footsteps. Soft, frantic footsteps moving back to the kitchen. I rolled off the bed silently. I moved to the door and knelt down, pressing my ear to the crack. I did not need to do this. The button on my chest was recording everything, transmitting it to Kat, but I needed to hear it. I needed to hear the venom with my own ears, to steel myself for what I was about to do. What are we going to do, Brad? Emily's voice was a hiss. The Ivanovs called again. They said if they do not have the title transfer by tomorrow night, they are sending cleaners. Relax, Brad said, his voice dripping with contempt. We have him. Did you see him? He is a vegetable. He can barely hold a spoon, let alone read a contract. He has no idea what that paper is. But he didn't sign it, Emily whined. He will sign it, Brad snapped. Let him sleep for an hour. When he wakes up, he will be groggy. I will tell him it is a prescription release form. He will sign anything to make the pain stop. And then what? Emily asked. What happens after he signs? Then we execute the plan, Brad said. As soon as the ink is dry, I have a van coming. A van? From the Sunshine Meadows facility, Brad said. I froze. Sunshine Meadows. I knew that place. It was a state-funded warehouse for the indigent elderly on the south side. It was a place where people went to die in urine-soaked sheets, ignored and medicated into oblivion. It was the cheapest, nastiest hole in the state. Brad. You cannot send him there, Emily said, but her voice was weak. It is awful. We do not have a choice, Emily, Brad hissed. It costs $2,000 a month. That is all his pension covers. We need every other dime to pay the interest on the loan. We sell his truck, we liquidate his savings account, we rent out the cottage. Every penny goes to the Ivanovs or we lose this house. Do you want to be homeless, Emily? Do you want Leo to grow up in a trailer park? No, Emily whispered. No, of course not. Then stick to the plan. He is useless, Emily. He is a burden. He has lived his life. Now he is just in the way. Once he is in the facility, we change his contact info so they cannot call us. We tell the neighbors he moved to Florida to be with his brother. By the time anyone asks questions, he will probably be dead anyway. There it was. The death sentence. They were not just stealing my money. They were stealing my life. They were planning to discard me like a broken toy to save their own skins. I felt a cold rage settle over me. It was not the hot, fiery anger of last night. This was the cold calculation of a judge passing a sentence. I did not just have a recording. I had a confession. I had conspiracy. I had intent to commit fraud and elder abuse. I stood up slowly. My knees did not creak this time. I walked to the window and looked out at the backyard. My grandson Leo was playing on the swing set I had built for him. He was innocent in all of this. But his parents were monsters. I touched the button on my shirt. Did you get that, Cat? I whispered. Loud and clear, Hank. Her voice came through the tiny earpiece I had inserted before entering the house. The police are on standby. We have enough for an emergency protective order right now. We can pull you out. No, I said. Not yet. The trap is not sprung. He wants a signature. I am going to give him a signature, but not the one he expects. I lay back down on the bed. I closed my eyes. I visualized the plan, the party, the guests, the humiliation. Sleep well, Brad, I thought, because when I wake up, your nightmare begins. I waited until the digital clock on the nightstand flashed 3 in the morning. The house had settled into a heavy silence, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the refrigerator and the occasional settling groan of the timber frame. I did not sleep. Sleep is a luxury for the innocent, and I was no longer innocent. I was a conspirator in my own life. I sat up on the edge of the lumpy mattress. My body ached. The burn on my face throbbed, a constant dull reminder of why I was awake. I listened. Upstairs, the floorboards creaked. Brad and Emily were asleep, probably dreaming of the money they were going to spend once they had discarded me. I stood up. My socks slid silently on the hardwood floor. I moved to the door and opened it an inch. The hallway was empty, a tunnel of shadows. I slipped out. I moved not like an old man with a cane, but like the mechanic I used to be, light on my feet, careful of where I placed my weight. I knew every squeaky board in this house. I paid for them after all. I made my way to the study down the hall. It was the room Brad called his office. He liked to sit in there with the door closed, pretending to be a master of the universe. I pushed the door open. It swung silently on well-oiled hinges. The room smelled of stale bourbon and desperate sweat. The desk was a chaotic mess of papers, unopened bills, and energy drink cans. But in the center of the chaos, the computer monitor was glowing. He had not turned it off. He had left it awake just like his greed. I walked around the desk and sat in his leather chair. It was warm. He must have been here late. I looked at the screen. A chat window was open. It was an encrypted messaging app, the kind people use when they do not want a paper trail. The user on the other end was named VultureCap. I smiled in the dark. That was Kat. Or rather, one of the forensic accountants Kat had set up with a dummy profile to bait him. I scrolled up, reading the history. It was pathetic. Brad wrote, "I need the bridge loan approved by Friday. The assets are secured. The old man is compliant." VultureCap replied, "We need proof of ownership, Brad. You have promised us the deed for weeks. If you do not have the signature, we walk." Brad, "I will have it. Tomorrow. I am hosting a signing ceremony. A party. High visibility. He will sign the transfer in front of witnesses. It is done." VultureCap, "Talk is cheap. Send confirmation when the ink is dry. Or better yet, invite us. We want to see the asset." I leaned back. Brad was not just selling my house to pay the Ivanovs. He was trying to leverage my remaining assets, my pension, my identity to secure fresh capital from a new investor. He was digging a hole so deep he would never see the sun again. I looked at the keyboard. My fingers hovered over the keys. I could delete this. I could wipe the drive. But that would just delay the inevitable. I did not want to delay. I wanted to accelerate. I began to type. "This is Brad. Change of plans. I want you at the party tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Bring the contract. You will see the old man sign the power of attorney and the deed transfer live. I want the funds wired the moment the pen leaves the paper." I hit send. The response was immediate. "We will be there. Do not disappoint us." I deleted the sent message from the local history, but left the incoming confirmation. I wanted him to see it when he woke up. I wanted him to think he had done it in a drunken stupor. Or better yet, I wanted him to not notice at all until the sharks showed up at his door. I stood up to leave. My heart was beating a steady rhythm, a war drum in my chest. I had just invited the executioner to his own party. And then I heard it. The sound of a toilet flushing upstairs, the rush of water through the pipes in the walls. Then footsteps. Heavy, clumsy footsteps. Brad. He was awake. He was coming downstairs. I froze. If he found me here in his office at 3 in the morning, sitting at his computer, the game was over. The confused, senile old man act would vanish. He would know. And he was desperate enough to do something permanent. I looked for an exit. The door to the hallway was the only way out, but his footsteps were already on the stairs. Thump, thump, thump. I scanned the room. The desk was open underneath no cover. The closet was filled with boxes. The window. No too loud. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. He was turning toward the kitchen, which was adjacent to the office. I could hear him muttering to himself, cursing the headache or the stress. I dove toward the heavy velvet curtains covering the French doors. I slid behind the fabric, pressing my back against the cold glass of the door. The dust from the curtains tickled my nose. I held my breath, pinching my nose to stop a sneeze. The office door creaked wider. The light from the hallway spilled into the room, cutting a slice of illumination across the carpet. I saw his shadow stretch out long and distorted. He walked in. I could hear his breathing. It was wet and ragged. He shuffled to the desk. I heard the clink of glass on glass. He was pouring another drink. At 3 in the morning. "Just sign the paper, you old bat," he mumbled. His voice was slurred. "Just die and make me rich." My fists clenched at my sides. It took every ounce of discipline I possessed not to step out from behind that curtain and end him right there. But I stayed still. I was a statue. I was a ghost. He sat in the chair. The leather groaned. I heard him tapping on the keyboard. He was checking the chat. Please, I thought. Please be too drunk to notice the timestamp. He grunted. Good, he whispered. They are coming. He stood up. He did not see the message I sent. He just saw the confirmation. He thought he had won. He walked out of the room, turning off the hallway light as he went. I listened to his footsteps retreat up the stairs. I listened to the bedroom door close. I let out a breath that I had been holding for 2 minutes. My lungs burned. My heart was hammering against my ribs, thumping so hard I thought it would crack the bone. It felt like the old days, like the time I had to hide in a warehouse in Detroit while Union busters searched the yard with flashlights. The fear was the same. The thrill was the same. I stepped out from behind the curtain. My legs were shaking. Not from age, but from the sheer voltage of the risk. I crept back to the guest room. I lay down on the bed and pulled the thin blanket up to my chin. I stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow night. 7 p.m. The stage was set. The actors were in place, and the script was written. Brad thought he was hosting a victory party. He thought he was inviting his investors to watch him claim his prize. He had no idea he had just sent an invitation to his own execution. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 24 hours, I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of the wolf waiting for the sheep to wander just a little further from the flock. Tomorrow, Brad, I thought. Tomorrow we see who really owns this house. The house began to vibrate with activity long before the sun went down. It was the sound of money being spent. Money that Brad did not have. Money that technically belonged to me. I sat in the guest room listening to the chaos. I heard the clinking of rental glassware and the heavy footsteps of caterers hauling in trays of hors d'oeuvres. I heard the screech of packing tape as decorations were hung. Brad was not just throwing a signing ceremony. He was throwing a coronation. He was crowning himself the king of my empire, and he wanted an audience to witness it. I peeked through the blinds. A white van was parked in the driveway unloading cases of expensive champagne. Another van from a high-end florist was delivering arrangements of white lilies. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Lilies are for funerals. Brad thought he was decorating for a celebration, but he had unknowingly dressed the house for his own wake. I waited until the noise in the hallway reached a crescendo, a mix of Brad shouting orders at the catering staff and Emily trying to coordinate the music. I slipped out of the room and moved quietly toward the laundry room at the back of the house. It was the only room without windows, the only place I felt truly secure from prying eyes. I pulled out the burner phone. My hand was steady. The tremors of the confused old man were gone, replaced by the iron grip of the chairman. I dialed Kat. Status, I asked the moment she picked up. We are green, Hank. The forensic audit is complete and it is damning. He has not just defrauded you. He has cooked the books on 3 of his failed LLCs. He has tax evasion going back 5 years. And the bank fraud on the mortgage application is a federal offense. Good, I said, leaning against the washing machine. I want them all there, Kat. Prepare the gifts. Gifts, she asked, though I could hear the smile in her voice. I want the IRS. I want the fraud division. I want the bank's foreclosure team and the economic crimes unit. I want them parked down the street at 6:55. At 7 o'clock exactly when I pick up that pen, I want those doors to burst open. Copy that. 7 p.m. The cavalry arrives. And Kat, make sure the lead agent knows the signal. I do not want them storming in until the video plays. I want Brad to see his life crumble on the big screen before the handcuffs go on. Understood. Hank, are you ready for this? It is going to be ugly. I looked at the lint trap of the dryer, my eyes focusing on the gray dust. It is already ugly, Kat. I am just turning on the lights. I hung up and slipped the phone back into my hidden pocket. I made my way back to the guest room unnoticed. It was time to get dressed. I opened the closet door and reached into the very back. Pushed behind the flannel shirts and the worn-out khakis was a garment bag I had not opened in 5 years. It was covered in a thin layer of dust. I unzipped it slowly. The smell of cedar and mothballs drifted out. Inside hung a charcoal gray suit. It looked old-fashioned to the untrained eye. But it was not just a suit. It was a bespoke piece hand-tailored in London from Italian wool. It was the suit I wore when I rang the opening bell at the stock exchange 20 years ago. It was the suit I wore when I negotiated the merger that made Caldwell Logistics a billion-dollar entity. It was my armor. I pulled it out and laid it on the bed. The fabric was still perfect, resilient, and tough, just like me. I went to the corner and plugged in the cheap travel iron Emily had left in the room. I filled it with water and waited for it to hiss. I began to iron. It was a ritual. With every pass of the steam, with every wrinkle I smoothed away, I was erasing the persona of Hank the victim. I pressed the collar of the white dress shirt until it was stiff and sharp. I pressed the crease into the trousers until they could cut glass. The steam rose around me, enveloping me in a cloud of heat and purpose. I was not just pressing clothes. I was pressing my will back into existence. I was remembering who I was. I was not the man who ate beans in a cold room. I was not the man who drove strangers for $5. I was the man who moved mountains. I put on the shirt. It fit a little looser than it used to. I had lost weight in the famine of the last few months, but the shoulders still held. I tied my tie a dark navy silk in a perfect Windsor knot. My fingers remembered the movements effortlessly. I slipped on the jacket. I buttoned it. I walked to the small mirror on the dresser. The reflection staring back was not the sad old man from the morning. The burn on my face was still there, ugly and raw, but it no longer looked like a wound. It looked like a battle scar. The stoop was gone. My jaw was set. My eyes were cold and clear. "Goodbye, old man Hank," I whispered to the glass. "You served your purpose. You showed me the truth. But you are too weak for what comes next." "Hello, Mr. Chairman?" There was a knock at the door. I quickly hunched my shoulders and relaxed my face, letting the mask slip back into place. "Come in," I called out, my voice trembling just enough. Brad entered. He was wearing a tuxedo for a house party. He looked ridiculous, like a waiter at a second-rate country club. He was sweating, his face flushed with manic energy. "Hank," he said, stopping short when he saw the suit. "Wow, look at you. Cleaning up for the big night, huh?" He reached out and fingered the lapel of my jacket. He frowned slightly, sensing the quality of the fabric, but he was too distracted to process it. "It is an old suit," I mumbled, looking at the floor. "From before." "Well, it fits okay," Brad said dismissively. "Listen, Hank, we have some very important people coming tonight. Investors, partners. I need you to be on your best behavior." I nodded slowly. "Best behavior." "Yes. When we call you up to the stage, you just smile and nod. You do not need to make a speech. You do not need to tell stories about the trucking days. Just thank everyone for coming, sit at the table, and sign the papers. Okay. Okay, Brad. Okay. Just sign. Good. And try to keep the bandage covered. It looks bad. We do not want to ruin the appetite of the investors." He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "Oh, and Hank, after tonight, things are going to get a lot better for you. You will see. Sunshine Meadows is really nice. Lots of sunlight." He winked. He actually winked at me. The arrogance was suffocating. He was already spending the money. He was already celebrating my exile. I watched him leave. The urge to punch him was overwhelming, but I held it back. Patience. The trap needs to snap shut on the neck, not the leg. A few minutes later, the door opened again. This time it was Emily. She was wearing a long, sequined gown that was far too formal for the occasion. She looked beautiful and brittle, like a glass ornament that was about to shatter. She was carrying a glass of water and a small paper cup. "Dad," she said, her voice overly bright. "You look handsome." "Thank you, Emily," I said. She walked over to me. Her hands were shaking slightly. She held out the paper cup. Inside was a single small blue pill. "I brought you something," she said. "It is just a little sedative, a mild one. Brad thought you might be nervous with all the people. It will help you relax. It will help you get through the evening without getting confused." I looked at the pill. I knew exactly what it was. It was a benzodiazepine, strong enough to knock out a horse. If I took this, I would be slurring my words within 20 minutes. I would be pliable, suggestible. I would sign my own death warrant and not even remember it. They were not just manipulating me. They were drugging me. My own daughter was drugging me to rob me. I looked into her eyes. I searched for any hesitation, any sign of remorse. I saw fear, yes, but I also saw resolve. She had chosen her side. "Thank you, honey," I said, my voice cracking. "You are always taking care of me." I took the pill. I put it in my mouth. I took a sip of water. I tilted my head back and swallowed hard. Emily watched my throat. She watched the swallow. She needed to be sure. "Good," she said, letting out a breath. "That is good. You just sit here for a bit until the music starts. We will come get you." She kissed me on the forehead. Her lips were cold. She left the room, closing the door softly. The moment the latch clicked, I leaned over the trash can. I coughed hard, forcing the pill up from where I had tucked it under my tongue. It fell into my palm, wet and dissolving slightly, but still whole. I looked at the little blue circle of betrayal. It was the final nail in the coffin of my fatherhood. There was no going back now. There was no saving them. I walked to the bathroom and flushed the pill down the toilet. I watched it swirl away into the dark water. I washed my face, avoiding the burn. I straightened my tie. I checked the time. 6:45. The guests were arriving. I could hear the murmur of voices, the clinking of glasses, the fake laughter of people trying to impress each other. The sharks were circling, but they didn't know there was a killer whale in the water. I walked back to the bed and sat down. I smoothed the fabric of my trousers. "I am not confused, Emily," I whispered to the empty room. "I am more awake than I have been in 5 years." I stood up. I walked to the door. I placed my hand on the knob. "Let's go downstairs," I said. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. The music was playing. The lights were dim. The stage was set. And the chairman was coming to cancel the show. The living room had been transformed into a theater of the absurd. The furniture I had paid for was pushed against the walls to make room for rows of gold Chiavari chairs rented for the evening. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the heavy musk of ambition. I stood in the shadows of the hallway, adjusting my cuffs, watching the sharks swim. There were about 50 people in the room. I recognized a few neighbors looking uncomfortable in their Sunday best, but the majority were strangers. Men in sharkskin suits with teeth too white and handshakes too firm. Women in cocktail dresses holding flutes of champagne looking bored. These were the investors, the marks, the people Brad was trying to hustle. I spotted the target immediately. Near the fireplace, standing apart from the herd, were 3 men in dark Italian suits. They did not hold drinks. They did not smile. One of them checked his watch with a gesture that screamed impatience. That had to be Vulture Cap. The hard money lenders, the people who thought they were buying a distressed asset at a discount. They had no idea they were walking into a bear trap. Emily was circulating through the room, playing the part of the gracious hostess. She laughed at jokes that were not funny and touched people on the arm with a practiced intimacy. She looked radiant and hollow. Every time she glanced toward the hallway where I was hiding, her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She was terrified. She knew the pill she gave me should be kicking in right about now. She was waiting for the zombie to emerge. Then the music faded. A spotlight, which Brad must have rented along with the chairs, cut through the dim room and focused on a small raised platform in front of the bay window. A table was set up there, draped in black velvet. On it lay a single leather folio and a heavy pen. It looked like an altar. Brad stepped into the light. He held a microphone with the casual confidence of a game show host. He looked handsome in his tuxedo if you did not look closely at the sweat beading on his forehead or the manic twitch in his left eye. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice booming through the rented speakers, "thank you for coming tonight. This is a very special evening for our family. A night of transition. A night of legacy." He paused for effect, letting the silence build. "Many of you know my father-in-law, Harrison Caldwell." Brad's voice dropped to a somber, reverent tone. "He is a man who worked hard his whole life, a simple truck driver who wanted nothing more than to provide for his family. But as we all know, time is a thief. I listened from the dark, my hands clenched in my pockets. Simple truck driver. That was the narrative. That was the lie. Over the last few years, Brad continued wiping a fake tear from the corner of his eye. We have watched this great man decline. His mind is not what it used to be. The confusion, the memory loss, it has been heartbreaking to witness. Just yesterday, he wandered off into a snowstorm, confused and alone. It was a wake-up call for us. We realized we could no longer let him carry the burden of his own affairs. A murmur of sympathy rippled through the crowd. Poor Brad. Such a good son-in-law. So tonight, Brad said, brightening his voice, we are taking a step to ensure his safety and his future. Tonight, Harrison is officially handing over the reins of the estate to us so we can ensure he lives out his remaining years in comfort and dignity. It is what he wants. It is what he needs. He gestured toward the hallway. Please welcome the patriarch of our family, Harrison Hank Caldwell. That was my cue. I stepped out of the shadows. I let my shoulders slump forward, collapsing my chest. I bent my knees slightly, giving my walk a fragile, trembling gait. I blinked rapidly against the harsh glare of the spotlight, acting dazed and disoriented. The room went silent. I could feel their eyes on me. I could feel their pity and their judgment. Look at him, they were thinking. Just a husk, a shell of a man. I shuffled toward the stage, dragging my feet on the expensive rug. I kept my head down, looking at the floor as if I were afraid of tripping. Emily rushed to my side. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my bicep. I have got you, Dad, she whispered through a clenched smile. Just keep walking. You are doing great. She smelled of fear and wine. I leaned on her, letting her take my weight. I feel dizzy. Emily, I mumbled loud enough for the front row to hear. Where are we? We are just at the party, Dad, she hissed. Get on the stage, sit in the chair, sign the paper. Then you can sleep. We reached the platform. Brad came down one step and took my other arm. He gripped me hard, his thumb pressing into the tender flesh of my inner arm, a silent warning. Right here, Hank, he said, his voice loud and jovial for the audience, but his eyes cold as ice. Just a few steps. Everyone is here to cheer you on. They hoisted me up the stairs like a sack of potatoes. They deposited me in the chair behind the velvet-covered table. The light was blinding. I blinked, looking out at the sea of faces. I saw the vulture cap men in the back. They were watching intently. They wanted to see the signature. They wanted to see the asset secured. Brad placed the leather folio in front of me. He opened it. There it was. The power of attorney. The deed transfer. The death warrant of my freedom. Here is the pen, Hank, Brad said, thrusting the heavy writing instrument into my hand. Just right there on the line. Like we practiced. My hand shook. The pen hovered over the paper. The tip of the nib danced above the signature line. I looked up at Brad. He was sweating profusely now. His eyes were wide, pleading and threatening at the same time. Sign it, he mouthed silently. Sign it, or you die. I looked at Emily. She was standing just off stage, wringing her hands. She looked away, unable to watch the execution she had arranged. I looked out at the audience. They were holding their breath. They wanted the show to end so they could get back to the champagne. I took a deep breath. I filled my lungs with the stale air of the room. I straightened my spine. I pushed my shoulders back. The slump vanished. The tremble ceased. The fog in my eyes cleared instantly, replaced by the sharp, cold gaze of a predator who has just spotted the jugular. I did not sign the paper. Instead, I reached out and grabbed the microphone from the stand. The feedback whined a sharp screech that made everyone flinch. Brad froze. His smile faltered. "Hank, what are you doing?" he whispered. "Just sign the paper." I ignored him. I brought the microphone to my lips. "Testing," I said. My voice did not sound like the raspy croak of a dying man. It boomed through the speakers, deep, resonant, and commanding. It was the voice that had shouted down union bosses. It was the voice that had commanded boardrooms. It was the voice of the chairman. Brad stepped back as if I had slapped him. The color drained from his face. He looked at Emily in panic. I stood up. I did not struggle to rise. I stood up with fluid, powerful grace. I unbuttoned my jacket, revealing the crisp white shirt and the silk tie. I looked at the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice steady and cold, "thank you for coming. My son-in-law has told you a very moving story tonight. A story about a frail old man, a confused old man, a man who needs protection." I turned to look at Brad. He was paralyzed. He was watching a corpse come back to life, and he did not know what to do. "It is a good story," and I continued walking around the table to the front of the stage. "But like most things in this house, it is a lie." A murmur ran through the crowd. The vulture cap men straightened up their eyes, locking onto me. Brad lunged forward, trying to grab the mic. "Dad, you are confused. Give me that." I sidestepped him easily. I was faster than him, stronger than him. "Sit down, Brad," I barked. The authority in my voice hit him like a physical blow. He stopped, stunned. "I am not confused," I said, addressing the room again. "I am not senile, and I am certainly not broke. My name is Harrison Caldwell. I founded Caldwell Logistics 40 years ago. I built this country's supply chain with these two hands, and tonight I am here to conduct a hostile takeover." The room was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. But before I sign anything, I said, lowering my voice to a dangerous whisper, "I think it is important that you all know exactly who you are doing business with. Brad invited you here to witness a transaction. Well, let us show you the transaction." I raised my hand and snapped my fingers. "Start the film, Cat," I said into the microphone. Behind me, the large projection screen that had been displaying a slideshow of happy family photos suddenly went black. The music cut out. The lights in the room dimmed further, plunging the audience into darkness. Brad turned to look at the screen. His eyes were wide with terror. He knew. Deep down, he knew what was coming. "No," he screamed, lunging for the projector. "Turn it off!" But it was too late. The screen flickered to life. The image was grainy at first, but then it sharpened. It was a video taken from a hidden camera. It showed a dining room table. It showed an old man in a flannel shirt holding a wooden toy. And it showed a young man in a Rolex standing over him, holding a steaming bowl of orange soup. The audio crackled through the speakers, loud and clear. "If you do not like the soup, Hank, maybe you should wear it." The audience gasped, a collective sound of shock and revulsion. On the screen, the soup flew. The old man gasped. The young man laughed. "That is what you deserve." Brad stood on the stage, frozen in the spotlight. He looked like a deer in the headlights of a semi-truck. He looked at the screen, then at the crowd, then at me. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Watch closely," I said into the mic. "The show is just getting started." The video on the screen continued to play a grotesque home movie of cruelty. The image was undeniable. It showed my son-in-law, the man standing in a tuxedo on the stage holding a bowl of soup like a weapon. It showed the steam rising from the orange liquid. It showed the malicious glee in his eyes. And then it showed the impact, the liquid splashing against my face, the flinch of an old man who just wanted to give his grandson a wooden toy. The audio in the room was so crisp, it felt like the slap of the liquid was happening right there in the ballroom. "That is what you deserve." Brad's voice echoed from the speakers, distorted but unmistakable. The guests in the room gasped. A woman in the front row covered her mouth with her hand. The champagne glass she was holding tilted, spilling expensive wine onto the carpet, but she did not even notice. The horror on the screen held everyone captive. But I was not done. I signaled Kat again. The video cut to black, but the audio continued. This time there was no picture, just the waveform of a voice oscillating on the screen. It was a recording taken only hours ago from the guest bedroom. The voice was Brad's, whispering with the hiss of a snake. "As soon as the ink is dry, I have a van coming. From Sunshine Meadows." Emily's voice on the recording sounded weak and complicit. "It is awful." Then Brad again, louder this time, filled with venom. "We do not have a choice. He is useless, Emily. He is a burden. Once he is in the facility, we change his contact info. We tell the neighbors he moved to Florida. By the time anyone asks questions, he will probably be dead anyway." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. The social veneer, the polite smiles, the networking, it all evaporated instantly, leaving only the raw, ugly truth exposed. These people thought they were attending a coronation, but they were witnessing a murder plot. I looked at the back of the room. The three men from Vulture Cap, the hard money lenders, stood up in unison. They did not look angry. They looked bored. They looked like men who had realized they were wasting their time on a bad bet. The leader of the group buttoned his jacket, cast a single look of disgust at Brad, and turned toward the door. His associates followed. They walked out without a word, leaving a wake of cold air behind them. That was the sound of Brad's future evaporating. Brad watched them go. His face turned a color I had never seen before, a mix of purple rage and white terror. He looked at the screen where his own voice was still echoing, talking about selling me like cattle. Then he looked at me. His eyes were not human in that moment. They were the eyes of a trapped animal realizing the trap has teeth. He let out a sound, a guttural roar of pure frustration, and lunged. He came at me fast, his hands reaching for the microphone, reaching for my throat, reaching for anything to stop the truth from destroying him. "You old bastard," he screamed. "You set me up." The crowd screamed. Emily shrieked my name. But Brad forgot one thing. He forgot that before I was a chairman, before I was a CEO, I was a driver. I hauled steel across the Midwest in winter. I fought union busters in Detroit parking lots. I had taken punches from men twice his size and kept standing. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I waited until he was within arm's reach. I shifted my weight to my left foot, pivoting my hips with the fluidity that belied my 70 years. Brad's momentum carried him forward, his hands grasping at empty air where my neck had been a second ago. As he stumbled past me, I brought my right hand up. I did not make a fist. I kept my hand open, palm flat, fingers rigid. I put 40 years of hard labor and 5 years of suppressed rage into the swing. My palm connected with his cheek. The sound was thunderous. It cracked through the room, louder than the feedback, louder than the screams. It was the sound of justice making contact with arrogance. Brad spun around from the force of the blow. His legs tangled and he crashed to the floor, landing hard on his side. His tuxedo tore at the shoulder. He lay there, stunned, his hand flying to his cheek, where a red imprint of my hand was already blooming, matching the burn on my own face. I stood over him. I adjusted my cuffs. I looked down at the man who thought he could throw me away. That I said, my voice calm and deadly quiet into the microphone, is for the soup. Brad looked up at me. There was no fight left in his eyes, only shock. He could not comprehend how the frail old man he planned to institutionalize had just floored him with a single blow. He started to scramble backward, trying to get away from me, trying to find a hole to crawl into. But there was nowhere to go. The double doors at the back of the ballroom, the ones Brad had decorated with gold ribbons for his grand entrance, burst open. They did not open gently. They were thrown wide with force, slamming against the walls. The light from the hallway flooded in, silhouetting a group of people. At the front walked Catherine Ross. She was no longer just my lawyer. She looked like the angel of death in a pantsuit. She held a leather portfolio against her chest like a shield. Behind her were 6 men. 4 were in the dark windbreakers of the federal police. 2 wore the suits and badges of the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. They moved with the precision of a tactical team. The guests parted like the Red Sea, scrambling to get out of the way. Glasses were dropped. Chairs were knocked over. The panic was palpable. Catherine walked straight down the center aisle, her heels clicking a rhythmic beat of doom on the hardwood floor. She did not look at the guests. She did not look at Emily, who was cowering by the curtains. She looked only at the man on the floor. "Bradford Jenkins," she announced, her voice projecting clearly to every corner of the room. Brad tried to stand up, using a chair for support. "Who are you?" he stammered, blood trickling from a cut on his lip. "You cannot be in here. This is a private party." Catherine stopped at the edge of the stage. She tossed the portfolio onto the velvet table. It landed with a heavy thud right next to the unsigned power of attorney documents. "This is no longer a party, Mr. Jenkins," she said coldly. "It is a crime scene." She signaled to the officers behind her. "Bradford Jenkins, you are under arrest." Brad blinked, his brain unable to catch up with reality. Arrest? For what? I did not do anything. "This is my house. He is crazy. He is senile." Catherine smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "We are not here for your family drama, Brad. We are here for the wire fraud. We are here for the tax evasion. We are here for the forgery of bank documents. And we are here for the conspiracy to commit elder abuse and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult." The officers moved in. They did not hesitate. They grabbed Brad by the arms. He tried to pull away, shouting incoherently, "Emily, tell them he is crazy." But the officers spun him around and slammed him against the stage. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut cut through the air. Click, 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 the sound of finality. Brad struggled, his face pressed against the wood of the stage, the same stage where he had planned to celebrate his victory. "You have the right to remain silent," an officer droned, reciting the Miranda warning. "Anything you say can and will be used against you." I stood on the stage looking down at him. The spotlight was still on us, illuminating his fall. Brad twisted his head to look at me. His eyes were wide, filled with tears of rage and confusion. "Why," he screamed. "Why are you doing this, Hank? You are broke. You have nothing." I reached into the inner pocket of my charcoal suit. I pulled out a piece of paper. It was a bank statement printed only hours ago. I unfolded it slowly, letting the light catch the paper. I crouched down so my face was inches from his. I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to see the burn on my cheek. I wanted him to see the man he had underestimated. "I am not broke, Brad," I whispered, so only he could hear. "I just bought your debt. I own the loan you defaulted on. I own this house. I own the car in the driveway. And as of this morning, I have $82 million in the bank." His eyes bulged. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The air left his lungs in a wheezing gasp. I stood up and smoothed my jacket. "Take him away, gentlemen," I said to the officers. They hauled him up. He was dead weight now, a broken man dragging his feet as they marched him toward the door. The guests watched in stunned silence as the host of the party was dragged out in cuffs. I looked at Catherine. She gave me a curt nod. The first phase was complete. The predator was caged. But the room was not empty yet. There was still one person left on the stage. One person who had watched it all, who had signed the papers, who had stood by while the soup burned my face. I turned slowly to look at my daughter. Emily was pressed against the wall, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes fixed on the empty doorway where her husband had just disappeared. She was shaking violently. She looked at me, and for the first time in 5 years, she saw me. She did not see a paycheck. She did not see a burden. She saw the storm. I took a step toward her. The floorboards creaked. "Dad," she whimpered. I did not smile. The show was over. Now came the judgment. The ballroom was a cacophony of shouting and the scuffling of heavy boots. But amidst the chaos, Brad's voice rose above it all, a shrill, desperate screech of denial. The federal agents had him pinned against the doorframe, but he was fighting with the manic strength of a man who sees his entire reality dissolving. "You cannot do this!" he screamed, spitting blood and saliva. "This is my property. I am the owner of record. That man is a squatter. He is a leech. He has nothing." He twisted his head, looking back at me with eyes that burned with hatred. "Tell them, Hank. Tell them you are just a senile old man living off my charity. Tell them this is a mistake." I did not speak. I simply nodded to Catherine. She stepped forward, calm and precise amidst the violence. She did not shout. She did not argue. She simply raised the heavy leather portfolio she had carried in and threw it. It flew through the air and struck Brad square in the chest with a dull, heavy thud before falling open at his feet. Papers spilled out onto the floor. Deeds, titles, loan transfer documents. The ink was fresh and the stamps were official. "You are wrong, Mr. Jenkins," Catherine said, her voice cutting through his screams like a knife. "You own nothing. The house you are standing in belongs to the Caldwell Trust, the sole beneficiary of which is Harrison Caldwell." Brad stared at the papers scattered around his shoes. He tried to kick them away, but the officers held him firm. "That is a lie," he gasped. "I mortgaged it. I got the money." "Yes, you did," Catherine continued relentlessly. "You fraudulently mortgaged a property you did not own using a forged deed, and then you defaulted on that loan. You owed the Ivanov syndicate $2 million as of yesterday." She paused, letting the weight of the name sink in. Brad stopped struggling. The mention of the Ivanovs drained the fight right out of him. "But here's the twist," Catherine said, smiling without warmth. "The Ivanovs sold your debt this morning. They were quite happy to get 60 cents on the dollar for a toxic asset." She pointed a manicured finger at me. "Your creditor is no longer a crime syndicate, Brad. Your creditor is Harrison Caldwell. You owe him $2 million plus interest and legal fees. And since you cannot pay, he is exercising his right to foreclose. Immediately." Brad looked at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He was not just going to prison. He was going to prison owing a fortune to the man he had thrown soup at. He slumped in the officer's grip, his legs giving out. "Take him," Catherine said. The officers dragged him through the doorway. His tuxedo shoes scraped against the floor, leaving black scuff marks on the hardwood. His screams faded into the night, replaced by the slamming of a heavy car door and the chirp of a siren. Then there was silence. The guests stood frozen, terrified to move, terrified to breathe. They were witnessing a public execution, and they did not know if they were next. But I was not looking at them. I was looking at the woman huddled on the floor near the curtains. My daughter. My Emily. She was weeping soft, broken sobs that shook her thin frame. Her makeup was running in black streaks down her face, ruining the expensive gown she had bought with my stolen money. When she realized Brad was gone, she scrambled to her feet. She ran to me, not with the grace of the hostess she pretended to be, but with the desperate, clumsy speed of a child who has broken a vase. She threw herself at my feet. She grabbed my hand, the same hand she had watched tremble earlier that day. "Dad, please," she wailed. "You have to stop them. You have to call them back." He is my husband. He is Leo's father. I looked down at her. I waited for a flicker of affection to stir in my chest. I waited for the instinct to protect her to rise up the way it had when she was 5 years old and scraped her knee. But there was nothing. Just a cold, hollow echo. He is a criminal. Emily, I said, my voice flat. He made a mistake, she cried, tightening her grip on my hand. We were desperate. We did not know what we were doing. I did not know Dad, I swear. I thought he was handling things. I did not know about the forgery. I did not know about the loans. I am a victim too. I pulled my hand away from her grasp. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a single piece of paper. It was a photocopy of the loan document Kat had shown me. I unfolded it and held it in front of her face. Look at it, I commanded. She blinked, her eyes swimming with tears. She tried to look away, but I moved the paper into her line of sight. Look at the signature line, Emily. She focused. Her breath hitched. Witnessed by Emily Caldwell. I pointed to the ink blot at the end of the Y. That is your hand, I said softly. That is your signature. You were in the room. You watched him trace my name. You watched him sell this house. And then you picked up a pen and you validated it. Dad, she stammered, backing away. Do not lie to me. I snapped, my voice rising for the first time. Do not insult me with lies. You knew. You knew when you signed that paper. You knew when you used my emergency credit card to gamble online last night while I was bleeding in a motel room. You knew when you gave me that pill tonight. She froze. Her face went white. You tried to drug me, Emily. You tried to chemically lobotomize your own father so you could throw him in a state facility and steal the last few dollars you thought I had. That is not a mistake. That is not desperation. That is a choice. Dad. Please, she begged, falling to her knees again. I was scared. Brad said it was the only way. I had to choose. Exactly, I said. You had to choose. And you did. I looked around the room at the silent guests, at the luxury decorations, at the life she had built on a foundation of sand. You chose your husband over your father. You chose greed over loyalty. You chose the illusion over the reality. Dad. What are you saying? She whispered. I am saying that actions have consequences, I replied. Brad is going to prison. And you are going with him, not to jail. I was not that cruel. I would not press charges against my own daughter, not yet, but I was done saving her. You are his wife, I said coldly. You signed the papers. You are complicit. Now you get to live the life you built. I looked at the door. Get out. Emily stared at me. Get out. But where will I go? This is my house. No, I said. It is my house, and I am evicting you. Dad, you cannot do this. I have nowhere to go. I have no money. Then you better start walking, I said, turning my back on her. You have legs. You have a degree I paid for. Welcome to the real world, Emily. It is cold and it is hard, and nobody gives you soup when you cry. She screamed then, a sound of pure entitlement being shattered, but I did not turn around. I looked at the guests. They were huddled in clusters, clutching their purses and their drinks. The party is over, I announced, my voice booming through the room. This property is now under the control of the Caldwell Trust. You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises. Anyone remaining after 5 minutes will be trespassing, and I will have the officers remove you. There was a scramble. Dignity was forgotten. People rushed for the coat rack. They rushed for the door. They did not say goodbye. They did not thank the hostess. They fled like rats from a sinking ship. Emily stood there for a moment longer alone in the center of the room. She looked at me one last time, hoping for a reprieve, hoping for the dad who used to fix everything. But that dad was gone. He had died the moment the soup hit his face. She turned and ran. She did not grab a coat. She did not grab a bag. She just ran out the door into the snow, chasing the police car that held her husband. I stood alone in the center of the ballroom. The music had stopped. The only sound was the wind howling outside and the distant wail of sirens. The room was empty. The house was empty. I walked to the table where the unsigned power of attorney documents still lay. I picked them up. I ripped them in half, then in half again. I let the pieces flutter to the floor like confetti. It was done. The debt was paid. The traitors were exiled. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. I saw the taillights of the guests' cars fading into the distance. I saw the empty driveway. I was alone. But for the first time in 5 years, I did not feel lonely. I felt clean. I took a deep breath, inhaling the silence. It smelled of victory. I pulled out my phone and dialed Kat. "It is done," I said. "The house is clear." "Good," she said. "What now, Hank?" "Now," I said, turning away from the window. "Now we start over." The house was silent. It was not the comfortable silence of a home at rest. It was the hollow, echoing silence of a tomb that had been looted. I stood in the center of the living room, my footsteps sounding loud and intrusive on the bare hardwood floors. I had moved fast. Money buys speed, and I had plenty of money. Within 3 hours of the police cars leaving, a professional moving crew had arrived. I gave them simple instructions. Remove everything. Every stick of furniture Brad had bought on credit. Every piece of art Emily had hung to impress her friends. The rugs, the curtains, even the expensive espresso machine on the kitchen counter. I told them to take it all to the dump or donate it to the Salvation Army. I did not care where it went as long as it was gone. Now the house was just a shell. The spot on the floor where Brad had fallen was clean. The stain of the soup on the wall had been scrubbed away. It was as if they had never existed. It was as if the last 5 years of my life had been erased with a sponge, leaving nothing but white walls and dust motes dancing in the moonlight. I walked through the empty rooms one last time. I looked into the kitchen where Emily had cooked that soup. I looked into the office where Brad had plotted my demise. I felt nothing. The anger had drained away, leaving a vast, calm space inside me. It was over. The tumor had been cut out. I stopped in the foyer. The heavy oak door was standing open, letting in the cold night air. It cleansed the house of the smell of stale perfume and desperation. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. The real one this time. The sleek titanium device that connected me to the world I actually belonged to. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. St. Jude's Home for Veterans. It rang 3 times before a tired voice answered. "Hello, St. Jude's." "Father Mike," I said. "This is Harrison Caldwell." There was a pause. "Harrison, it has been a long time. I thought, well, I heard you were having hard times." "You heard wrong, Father. I am doing fine. Better than fine. Listen, I have a proposition for you." I walked out onto the porch, looking at the expansive front lawn. I am standing in a 5-bedroom house in the suburbs. It has a large yard, a finished basement, and a new heating system. It is fully paid off. It is empty. "Okay," Father Mike said cautiously. "I want to give it to you." "What?" "I want to donate the property to the mission," I said firmly. "Use it for the transitional housing program. Use it for the vets who are sleeping under bridges tonight. It can hold 3 families easily. Maybe 4. "Harrison, are you serious? That is $1 million property. It is just wood and stone, Father. It needs to be purified. It needs to be used for something good, something honest. I want the deed transfer to happen tomorrow morning. My lawyer, Catherine Ross, will call you with the paperwork. Can you have a crew here by noon to change the locks?" "Yes. Yes, of course." "Harrison, I do not know what to say. This will change lives." "That is the point," I said. Good night, Father. I hung up. I dropped the keys on the floor of the porch. I did not need them anymore. This was no longer my house. It was a shelter. It was a place where honor would live instead of greed. I walked down the driveway. The snow had started to fall again, covering the tire tracks of the police cruiser, covering the scuff marks of Brad's struggle. The world was turning white and clean. At the curb, a car was waiting. It was not my rusted Ford pickup truck. That old beast had been towed away an hour ago, destined for the scrapyard. It had served its purpose. It had carried the disguise of Hank, the poor old man. But Hank was retired now. The car was a black Lincoln Continental, long and sleek with tinted windows. The engine idled with a low, powerful hum. The driver, a man named Thomas who had worked for me for 20 years before I went into hiding, stepped out and opened the rear door. He did not look at my bandage. He did not look at my old clothes. He looked me in the eye with respect. "Good evening, Mr. Chairman," Thomas said. "Good evening, Thomas," I replied. I slid into the back seat. The leather was soft and warm. The smell of the car was familiar leather and mint. It smelled like success. It smelled like my old life. "Where to, Sir Thomas?" asked, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror. I looked out the window at the dark house one last time. I thought about Emily running down the street in the snow. I thought about Leo, and I hoped that one day when he was old enough, he would understand. I hoped he would find the trust fund I left him and use it to build a life of his own far away from the toxic shadow of his parents. "Take me to O'Hare, Thomas," I said. "The private terminal. You have a flight, sir?" I nodded. "My plane is fueled and waiting." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out 2 tickets. They were old, yellowed with age. I had bought them 5 years ago, just weeks before Martha got sick. We were going to see the world. We were going to Paris, Rome, Tokyo. We were going to eat pasta in Florence and watch the sunset over the Parthenon. She never got to go. The aneurysm took her before we could even pack a bag. I rubbed my thumb over her name on the ticket. Martha Caldwell. "We are going to Paris, Thomas," I said, my voice soft. "And then Rome. And then wherever the wind takes us. I have a promise to keep." "Very good," Sir Thomas said. He put the car in gear and we pulled away from the curb. I did not look back. I did not watch the house disappear in the rearview mirror. I looked forward. The road ahead was dark, but the headlights cut through it, illuminating the path. I touched the burn on my face. It still stung, but the pain was different now. It was not the pain of injury. It was the pain of healing. The skin would scar. Good. I wanted the scar. I wanted to remember. I settled back into the seat. For the first time in 5 years, I did not have to pretend. I did not have to hunch my shoulders. I did not have to lower my eyes. I was Harrison Caldwell. I was the man who built an empire, and I was finally free. As the car accelerated onto the highway, merging with the stream of red taillights heading toward the city, I closed my eyes and let the hum of the engine soothe me. They thought I was weak. They thought I was finished. They looked at a flickering flame and thought it was dying. They forgot the most basic rule of nature. A candle creates light, yes. But if you knock it over, if you treat it with disrespect, if you dare to play with it, that little flame can burn down the entire building. I am not the ashes. I am the fire. And I am just getting started. This story serves as a powerful reminder that we should never mistake silence for weakness or kindness for stupidity. Brad and Emily looked at an old man and saw only a burden, forgetting that he was the very foundation upon which their comfortable lives were built. They learned too late that unearned wealth often rots the character, while true strength is forged in the fires of adversity. We must always treat those around us with dignity, regardless of their status, because the people we think are disposable often hold the power to change our lives or destroy them. If watching Hank reclaim his empire fired you up, please hit that like button to support the channel. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who underestimated you? Tell me your story in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story of justice served cold.